Hi everyone, and welcome back to Decisive Squirrel Homestead. It is Sunday morning in October, and that means we are going to make some pumpkin scones. Our family goes through a lot of these when I make them, so I usually quadruple, quintuple, sextuple the recipe, but we are going to put the actual single recipe up on the screen here. And what I am making today is a quadruple recipe because I used some canned pumpkin for something else, and what I have left is enough to do a quadruple recipe. So that's what I'm doing today. But first up, you want to combine all of the dry ingredients in whatever size mixing bowl you need for whatever size recipe you're making. I don't think I can talk and count at the same time. Nope, not on a weekend morning, I can't. So our flour is in, and then there's cornstarch in this recipe, and that gives the scones a much more tender texture. So that makes them not quite so tough and dry. And of course we need baking powder so everything rises. And then all of our flavorings. So first up, salt, because you need salt in all of your baked goods, right? Cinnamon, we go through a lot of cinnamon, so that's no good. So we always buy the big container of it because we go through it really fast. I have the video camera on. For nutmeg, we learned this cool trick from my brother-in-law to buy actual nutmeg. So this is what it looks like when you buy it. And to grind it ourselves. So that's a nutmeg. And then if you have a little spice grinder and you grind it fresh, you get so much better flavor out of it. You'll notice that I just grind it in here because I'm not real precise with my measurements anyway. That looks about right. We have allspice in here. and ginger. Oh, I don't know if I have enough one. Maybe there's enough in this bottle. That's about right. And that bottle is done. All right, so we have all of our dry ingredients in a large bowl, and we're going to just mix those up so the spices are not clumped together. And then we're going to set that aside in the freezer. We want this to be cold before we add the butter to it so the butter doesn't melt. We want the butter to stay in solid chunks. So now that all the dry ingredients are mixed up, those are going to go in the freezer. And then the wet ingredients are going to get mixed up. So that is pumpkin. And then you can use either cream or evaporated milk, or you can use dry milk and mix it up to be evaporated milk. So you mix it up more concentrated than normal. But I'm using evaporated milk because I have some that needs to be used up. And I need almost this whole can, but not quite. So my milk's getting mixed in with my pumpkin. I like these better with evaporated milk instead of cream. I don't like the texture I get with cream. They come out a little bit more dense and chewy, and I like them to be a little bit more flaky. So we're going to mix that up, and then brown sugar. Yes, there is quite a bit of sugar. First of all, because I'm quadrupling the recipe. And second of all, because they are a treat. Definitely more of a dessert than something healthy for breakfast. And then our vanilla also goes in here. Yes, we also have a very large bottle of vanilla. We get this at our local farm stand market. It's vanilla from Mexico. It's got the best flavor, and we go through a ton of it. So very large bottles of vanilla around here. So all of these wet ingredients get mixed up. And then while we mix up our flour and butter, these also sit in the freezer so that they'll be nice and cold when we combine everything. So again, our butter does not melt. We want it to stay in nice little chunks. That's what gives our scone its texture. So we're gonna go put this in the freezer. All right, mixing our butter into the dry ingredients is going to be easier if it's in small pieces. So I'm gonna take each of my sticks of butter, again, a lot of butter, but also I'm quadrupling the recipe, so that makes a big difference. But we're going to open this up, and then cut it into small chunks so I don't have as much work to do. And sometimes if I'm making a single recipe, I will mix the butter into the flour with a food processor. You can do that, you just have to be careful that you don't process it too long because the blades moving does heat up the butter and you're wanting it to stay pretty cold while you're doing this. So I'm going to take my sticks of butter and cut each stick into fourths. So I have long, skinny pieces. Nothing precise about this. I'm just trying to get smaller pieces so it's less work for me. Once I have the long, skinny pieces, I'm going to cut it to make small chunks. Again, I don't want anything to melt, so I'm handling it as little as possible. I'm just trying to get smaller pieces to start with. And once that's all done, now it's time to get my dry ingredients out of the freezer and mix in this butter. All right, so I'm gonna dump all of this butter into my flour in one go. In the bowl, not out of the bowl. And then with clean hands, we are just gonna get in here and get all of these butter pieces kind of broken apart and coated in butter so they're all separate. And we're going to start working on mixing this in. And all you're doing is basically smushing this butter with your fingers. So just squeezing it and rubbing this all into the flour. Again, if you're doing a single recipe, you can do this in a food processor. You just need to be really careful not to overdo it so the butter doesn't get too hot and start melting. But with a large recipe, it tends to work better to do it with your hands because this would be multiple batches in the food processor. All right, this is almost all done now. I'm just looking for any other big clumps that are left. You can see it's almost like the texture of wet sand is basically what you're wanting to go for. So you're still gonna have, like that's butter in there. I'm gonna mash it up a little bit more, but you're still gonna have like some flakes of butter that you're gonna be able to find. And that's fine. We just don't want any big chunks. Those squares that we cut, we don't want to feel those anymore. So this is looking like it's just about done. Just one more. And now we're going to take our wet ingredients that have been sitting in the freezer and we're going to just dump those in all in one go. And again, you can do this part in a stand mixer, a little bit easier on your hands, but it does heat up the dough more. So you want to be careful not to overmix if you do that. And it is perfectly okay to just get in there with clean hands and do it. We're going to pour all of this in at once. We're going to make sure everything gets out of the bowl. I'm going to kind of get it mixed in just so it's not soupy. As soon as I can't mix it really with a spatula anymore, then I'm just going to start mixing it with my hands. You don't want to make your dough tough, so you don't want to overdo it. You're just trying to get everything combined. Make sure there's no big pockets of flour left in there. And you can see it's pretty mixed up now, and it's still a sticky dough. That's just how it is. If you try to make it not sticky, your end product is going to be tough. It won't be as good. So don't be adding flour to it or anything, just let it be sticky. And this looks pretty mixed up, so now I'm going to dump this out and make sure it's done being mixed. So I have some flour down there on the bottom. I need to make sure it doesn't get left out. And it is crumbly and messy. That's what it's supposed to look like. Don't add flour until it all holds together, or you're going to have tough scones. So this is about right. Now, since I'm making a quadruple recipe, I'm going to cut this into 4 pieces. Okay, so I'm just going to use a pastry cutter and nothing super precise, just cutting it to about 4 pieces. Now, if you're doing a single recipe, you're only going to have 1 of these, and that's fine. But for each of these, we're going to get it kind of into a ball so that we can press it into a circle. About that size. Again, not precise. It's not a perfect circle, and it doesn't really matter exactly what size it is. And I'm going to cut this into 8 pieces, just like a pie. And those are going to be my scones. I usually bake these on a stoneware pan sprayed with some nonstick cooking spray. You could also do just a regular baking pan with foil on it. Might have to do a tiny bit of flour. Some of these are sticking. But there are my scones that are ready to go in the oven. So when you're putting these on the pan, they need a little bit of space to puff up, but not much. And I usually alternate them so I can fit them a little bit better. If you want to save these for later, you can do a really large recipe, get them to this stage where you cut them, and then put them on a foil-lined cookie sheet and throw them in the freezer, just like this. And when you're ready to bake them, just take them out, make sure they have enough space, and let them thaw a little bit while the oven preheats, and then you can bake them from frozen. So they're nice to make ahead of time when you're going to have company for the holidays or anything like that. And they're easy to pull out of the freezer and cook. Nope. This ball of dough is bigger than the others. These are going to be the giant scones. All of my kids will be wanting to claim these for themselves. All right, so my scones are mixed up. They're on the pan waiting to go in the oven. Oven is preheating right now, and those will bake for about 15 or 20 minutes. While that's happening, we need to clean up our mess. And if you don't know, a great way to clean up a countertop mess like this is to have a pastry scraper, which is what we use to cut up our scones anyway. And you can kind of hold this at an angle and scrape all of your dough that's stuck to the counter and get it mostly clean so it's easy to wipe down. So you're not trying to wipe over wet dough and flour and all of that fun stuff. So that gets your counter mostly clean, and then you just have to wipe it down, easy peasy. All right, our scones are out of the oven and now they need a little bit of icing. We do a cinnamon icing on these. There are other people who do a ginger molasses icing. You can play around and put whatever flavor you want on it. I don't generally follow the recipe, so we put that up at the beginning, but you can also just eyeball it. So powdered sugar, however much cinnamon you want, depending on how much cinnamon flavor you want in there. We're going to mix that up a little bit so that our cinnamon doesn't clump. And then just a little bit of milk to get it a good consistency so we can put it on the scones, but it's not too runny. For a cup of powdered sugar, it's going to be about 1.5 tablespoons or 2 tablespoons of milk. But I just add some and stir it up and see where I'm at, and then add more milk or more sugar as needed. I might have gotten this right on the first try. Tiny bit more. And then once this is all mixed up, I'm going to put it in just a Ziploc sandwich bag. And this is going to be just an easy way to pipe this on. So I can take my bag and close that up. And then just snip off the corner of the bag here. And I ice the scones on the sheet that they baked on so that I just have to clean one thing. And you can do as much or as little icing as you want. You can even have no icing, but my kids might mutiny if I did that. And there you go. A nice fall treat. Very, very similar to the Starbucks pumpkin scones, if you know what those are like.